Thank you all for being here in our first meeting back. Kind of bear with us as we sort out how to run a hybrid meeting, because this is new for all of us. We'll start off with staff doing the roll call, please.
Newman? Sorry, Newman? Yes. Sorry. Hawkins?
Present.
Jason Hurst?
Present.
Bob Ackerman?
Present.
Stephanie Sutton?
Here.
James Blythe?
Here.
And Sophia Corrigedo. Is that how you pronounce your last name?
Corrigedo.
Okay, Corrigedo?
Here.
Okay.
Thank you. Next up is adoption of the agenda. I would just, before someone makes a motion, we do need to have board elections tonight. I'd like to suggest that go first after adoption of the agenda, but if someone would like to make that motion.
Vice Chair Sutton, I'd like to make a motion that I don't know if this requires a motion. I'd like us to consider that the next meeting, and if we could get some backup from staff, just giving us some indication of, I don't know, how long everybody has served, who hasn't served as a chair or vice chair in the past, so that when we make that decision, we can kind of look and see, I don't know, sort of we can make that decision knowing who everybody is and how much experience they have.
Okay, I need either a motion to include it tonight or not to include it tonight. So you're saying,
so here,
or would you like to open it for discussion?
Why don't I make this motion? It'll have 3 parts. That Vice Chair Sutton chair the meeting this evening, that we include on our regular January meeting board elections for our chair and vice chair, and then third, we adopt the agenda as presented with one modification, which is to consider the October minutes.
Okay, any discussion or a second on that motion?
What was the last part of your motion?
Oh, the agenda references the December minutes instead of the October minutes. So to consider the October minutes on tonight's agenda.
Thank you. That's because we did not have a December 10th meeting because we had to cancel it.
I would second that.
Okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so that passes unanimously. So we'll do board elections in January, and if staff can prepare those requested materials, that would be great.
just so we're looking mostly for the terms, current terms, and then who the past chair and vice chair have been in the last couple of go-arounds. Got it.
Thank you. So then moving on, the approval of the minutes. Can I get a motion to adopt the minutes from our October meeting?
So moved. Second.
A second, Mr. Newman. Okay, all those in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed?
Who made the motion?
Passes unanimously. Mr. Hawkins made the motion. Mr. Newman seconded.
Thank you.
Staff, can you please read the announcement into the record?
Yes. Section 30-3.3 of the Land Development Code establishes the Plan Board, including its membership, rules of procedure and functions, powers, and duties. The Plan Board is advisory to the City Commission on most planning petitions. Appeals of Plan Board decisions concerning special use permits are to a hearing officer within 30 calendar days of the decision. See Section 30-3.58C of the Land Development Code. The procedure for an appeal is set forth in Section 30-3.58.
Thank you. Are there any requests to address the board on items not on our agenda? And I guess there's no one here with us in the room, but I'm not sure if there's anyone on the phone line And so
No,
let us
no
know.
ma'am, nobody on the phone.
Okay, thank you. Then we'll jump into old business. Staff, can you please read the first item into the record?
Petition PB-19-112 SUP CHW Inc., agent for WRJ Sales Inc., request for a special use permit to allow the construction of a fuel station with 12 gas pumps and an associated convenience store facility. Zoned BA Automotive Oriented Business, located at 4545 Northwest 13th Street.
Okay, and my understanding is that our staff presentation for this will be done through Zoom by Mr. Castillo. Is he able to share his screen and get started?
Sure can. Well, let me start off by saying good evening, City Plan Board members. Let me see if I can share my screen here really quickly. All right. And I hope everyone has had an incredible new year.
Thank you.
I hope so. So for the record, my name is, can everybody see my screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Beautiful. Okay, so for the record, my name is Juan Castillo. I am with the Department of Sustainable Development. And a quick refresher, the item before you is a special use permit request for an additional 6 fueling positions on a proposed gas station located on a property adjacent to the apex of Northwest 13th Street and Northwest 6th Street. Let's see here. There we go. All right. So the proposed convenience store building associated with the development is located on the northwestern portion of the site, closest to the intersection of Northwest 13th Street and Northwest 6th Street. At the City Plan Board meeting on October 22nd, the City Plan Board identified 2 concerns with this application. The existing billboard sign and the frontage design of the proposed convenience store. Concerning the billboard sign, and after further review by staff, staff has identified the sign as being a legal non-conforming sign, which will be required to be brought to conformity per section 30-9.9.d.2 of our Land Development Code. In light of this, staff is proposing an additional condition to the special use permit request that will make the approval of this special use permit subject to bringing the non-conforming sign into conformity with our LDC. Concerning frontage design, the applicant is proposing a series of modifications. These modifications include additional glazing, the addition of architectural elements such as bands and corner dressings with higher quality materials, sign placement, the removal of a service ladder, the screening of electronic wiring, and the reorientation of the front door with additional glazing to reflect the door design located on the southern side of the building. Furthermore, applicant is proposing additional landscape along the northern side, which includes additional trees and shrubs. This is a rendering submitted by the applicant, which shows most of the proposed amendments to the frontage design. The applicant may have some additional images, which may help the board further envision the proposal today. Review of this application and the proposed amendments, along with the proposed conditions, show that the applicants meet review criteria for special use permits, regulations for car wash, and regulations for gasoline stations. Therefore, staff is recommending approval with conditions. The conditions on this application are as follows. Approval is subject to bringing the legally non-conforming sign located on the northern point of the property into compliance with the city's sign code. Development's sidewalk must connect to existing sidewalk on Northwest 6th Street. Approval is subject to the creation and approval of a lot split dividing the proposed development from the southern residential property. Connection will be provided to the new parcel created after the lot split, and the gas station canopy height shall not exceed 15 feet measured from the bottom surface of the canopy. Thank you, and that concludes my presentation. And of course, I am available for any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Mr. Castillo. Do any board members have questions for staff on this petition? Yes. Mr. Ackerman?
For Mr. Castillo, bringing the sign into conformance implies what? That it's removed? Because if the off-site signs are no longer permitted in the city, absent being a pre-existing non-conforming.
Right, so it would entail either the removal of the sign, or it would have to be brought under the conforming of the sign size. So right now it exceeds the height limit for signs and the sign square area. So if they were to propose a new sign that would fall within the city's guidelines for signs, that would of course be allowed, but this particular sign will have to be removed and will have to comply with city's sign ordinance.
A follow-up question. The city doesn't currently permit off-site signs. Isn't that accurate?
That's correct.
So if they brought this sign, they reduced its height and reduced its square footage, I guess it could be a sign for this current petitioner, but for nobody else?
I didn't understand that last part. What?
That's correct.
It would have to be a sign for the proposed user,
The
not for
on-site,
another
Yeah,
business.
for the on-site.
Right, that's correct.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff on this petition? I know we have a couple of new board members who didn't see this item originally with the rest of us. Okay.
Madam
Seeing
Chair,
none? Yes?
I don't have any lights, sorry. I would just say to the new board members, in case if they didn't have a chance to review the record, then we would just recommend that they not take any vote. If you did go back and review the record from the last hearing, then you're okay voting.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Persons. With that, seeing no other questions for staff, we'll jump to the applicant presentation. I see Mr. Diedenbach. I'm not sure if there are other CHW folks or if you will be presenting today, Mr. Diedenbach. Great. So if we let you share your screen and present what you have for us tonight. Welcome.
Welcome. Do you have my screen share at this point in time?
Yes, we do.
Okay, very good, thank you. Well, welcome to 2021. We're excited to be here. This has been a long road for us, but we've also listened to your comments and your suggestions last time and have a modified application before you. So I will jump right into it, and welcome to the new plan board members this evening. This is proof of notification. We actually notified the public twice on this, once because we had done the special use permit and development plan, and then again we had to come back, as you recall, and get a well field special use permit. So we advertised the well field special use permit as well as the special use permit and development plan, and refreshed all of the public notification for this actual application. The well field special use permit was approved unanimously by the board a few months ago, and now we're here for the special use permit portion to add 6 additional fueling positions for a total of 12 at this location. As Juan said, this is the apex or the intersection of US 441, Federal Highway, and North 6th Street. Both are Florida Department of Transportation roads, with one being 441 and the other one being actually State Road 20 at this point. The purpose of this is to relocate a fuel station, which, as most of you recall, is at the intersection of 441 and Northwest 53rd Avenue, and I'll show that in a few moments. By relocating that, we can build a modern station that is fully in compliant with all rules and regulations, as well as better manage the traffic in and around the area, because the other one sits at kind of a very convenient place for cut-through traffic if you're coming south on 441, or if you want to cut the intersection off and get around the stoplight there. The path that we have followed has been a long one. This project actually started in our office in 2018. That's why this one has a 19 coding number for you all. We were before the board, and in September had the Wellfield special use permit approved for this site. And now we're here in January of 2021 for the actual special use permit. And hopefully we will submit our development plans consistent with your approval tonight and recommendations, and have a complete package earlier in the spring here of 2021. As Mr. Castillo said, the site is at the apex of US 441, Northwest 13th Street and 6th Street. This is an area that is very heavily traveled coming in and out of the Gainesville city area, coming from the north in Alachua. The existing site for this gas station is about a half a mile north here at the intersection of 53rd Avenue. So our project site takes the former mobile home sales lot here that sits at the apex of this intersection and uses the northern portion of that property to relocate the station, which is currently here at 53rd, about 2,500 feet or about a half a mile to a more opportune location, and allows us to have a much more modern actual fueling station. This is the view of the existing station. As you can see, it sits at the traffic light. It's very, very old. It has old, very narrow drive aisles through it, and people tend to cut through here if they're trying to skirt around that traffic light. So it's our intent, if this is all approved, that we will be relocating from this site here to this location here. The surrounding context uses, if you haven't been on North 441 or North 6th Street, are largely vehicle or other industrial type uses. The combined Honda, Yamaha, Kawasaki, Suzuki, Triumph, Ride Now Power Sports is here across the street. Park Place Motors, Social Security Administration, Paradise Trailer Court, Gatorland Kubota, they sell tractors and other farm equipment. Down here to the south is Nelson's Building. Nelson's Buildings, and they have metal prefabricated buildings for sale. There's an apartment complex south here, and then there are other uses along the North 6th Street corridor, such as the American Legion Hall and U-Haul, and a large conditioned storage building was under construction when this aerial was flown here. And so this is an area that's very heavily traveled with a lot of vehicular oriented uses and moving and storing type uses, as well as all the industrial uses that are here on North 6th Street. The project has commercial land use on it, and it has the required complementary business, automotive oriented business BA zoning. And so we are requesting in this zone through this SUP to go from 6 fueling positions to a total of 12. As was shown, the preliminary site plan locates the building in the northern portion up on the corner itself, kind of addressing this view as you're coming down 441, and here sitting, allowing then the vehicular uses to circulate from access drives that are far away from the slip lane here around the nose of this intersection and down here off this turn lane on 441. The store will be at the northernmost location, kind of framing that corner there. The fuel canopy will sit behind the store, and the actual fuel cells will be here, and there will be a car wash facility at the southern portion of the site, kind of wrapped by the retention basin. Sidewalks will be completed in the area because currently there are some sidewalks along 441, but when you get to this position here, there's nowhere really to walk. So we will be actually creating sidewalks around the nose of the intersection, around the store, and then down the northern portion of 6th Street to the termination of the existing sidewalks that are here by the southern end of the property line, right about here. One of the things that we have done since the last plan board meeting was we have reoriented the doors and the actual access entry on the north side of this vestibule. Originally they were on the sides, but now the actual front door will be on the north face of the vestibule, facing out into the actual frontage lawn, if you will, of the property. The rest of the area here is the area that is upland, because there are a buffering set of land patterns here and on the southeast side, because there's a wetland through this southeastern portion of the site. We will be doing a lot split, as was discussed in the staff report, because it leaves a residual acre of land or so here where additional development could occur in the future. Kind of apologizing a little bit after the fact, and I think I apologized as this was very difficult to read when we were at the last meeting with all these leader lines, and so we went back and our client listened to your recommendation, took and modified this vestibule that had previously had doors on the sides to one that will be more front facing. This is not the actual vestibule, but it is a good example of what we're talking about. If you don't speak in architectural language every single day, it is a protrusion off the building that allows a bit of conditioned space. So when you enter into the building, before actually coming into the store proper, there's a conditioned area here that has air conditioning, and it provides an adequate safety entrance. And then there's another door inside that. So this is an entryway here. These are the color renderings as staff had shown one of them in their presentation. What we have done largely on the north side is primarily 8 things. As you recall, there was a section over here where the air conditioning units were going to be on the ground and in a ground-oriented pad. We've actually put inside the parapet wall the air conditioning and mechanical units on the roof of the building. There was a ladder that was going to allow access on the western side of the building. That ladder has been moved over here where a service truck would be closer. So if a service vehicle were to be parked in the eastern portion of the parking lot, the access ladder to the roof would be on this side, which is the less traveled side than 441, and it would allow them access to the roof where the air conditioning units will be hidden behind the parapets here. We have relocated the front entrance vestibule doors so they are now facing out into the intersection. We have modified the exterior stucco pattern on the store to actually have a 2-tone color pattern on it with lighter accents at the front core canopy and then at the columnar side. So it kind of bookends, if you will, the building form. We have added additional signage here on the north face so that when you're coming down 441, it is clearly visible that this is a store and the protruding vestibule is here. We have added banding in alignment with the color palette of Circle K so that in the areas of the dark stucco, as on the south side of the building, it will have this north color band here along that. And we did this in conjunction with working with staff. We had a phone call with them after the last plan board meeting and went through and talked about additional architectural treatments that could be done. And adding a color band here along with the 2-tone stucco pattern to actually give the building a little bit more ornamentation helps also create that visual line there and give you some idea of the size and scale. It's a single-story building, but with the parapet and the capitals here, it gives you a little bit more of a completed look as opposed to just the traditional sort of box-type frame or a gabled roof here. We've also taken the stone veneer that was on the east and west sides of the building and wrapped it around to the north side, and then taken that stone veneer and placed it where the building has an actual protrusion out here. It kind of steps out past this mechanical wall, and then we've actually added the stone veneer columns here on either side of the vestibule. So you get that repetitive effect of the outer edges of the building here having the stone veneer, then at this articulation of the facade, stone veneer is added, and then here around the vestibule, we've added the stone veneer. We've added additional glazing to the north side, so when you're looking at this building on both sides of the door, there will be actual windows so you can see into the store. And then lastly, there was a comment about the chain link fence that would have been placed over here where the air conditioning handling units were. Since those are going to be on the roof, and then the only mechanical appurtenances that are on the exterior of the building, which are kind of locked in place by their function and their connection to Gainesville Regional Utilities, are the 2 sets of electrical panels here. So instead of chain link fence, we're going to come in with a privacy fence that is complementary in color, but yet contrasting, and place a privacy fence along this section of the wall to keep folks from wanting to come up here and switch off the power or, you know, do anything nefarious or graffiti this. We'll actually put a privacy fence there. And we'll mirror that privacy fence over on this side here, so we have a little bit more of a balanced feel of the fencing here that'll kind of hide these electrical breaker panels and the point of connection coming in from GRU. Lastly, working with our landscape architects, we have done an enhanced planting plan for the north side of the building, which includes a shrub line that will be in front of this privacy fence and will wrap around the building here on the, what I'm calling the northwestern portion, and then around the corner here. and then more heavy landscaping on the northeastern portion, and we've added additional trees in here. This original plan showed you what it looked like with the billboard in place, and because the billboard must be removed with the redevelopment of the site as per 9.9D2, this will become excuse me, more of a landscape lawn type area. So today, I think it's kind of interesting and a little bit, I guess, odd that Wawa chose to advertise on this corner where they probably know that Circle K is going. So today there is a Wawa billboard out there. With the removal of the billboard, that is the building in place in a redeveloped configuration. This shows the code compliant landscape, and then this shows our enhanced landscaping with larger shade trees around the northwestern portion of the building, one over here on the northeastern portion, and smaller ornamental trees along the north side, which actually frame that door. So we have this view in an artist rendering looking from 441 and kind of the bike lane position, if you will, of 441. This is from the existing median island where 6th Street and 441 converge. There's today looking at Free Coffee Tuesdays. And that's what the site will look like without the billboard in place. That's the code compliant landscape, and this is the enhanced landscape package, which will wrap both the northeast side of the building and then run down the northwest side. And it'll really create a much more attractive feel than what's currently out there today, which is that. This is a close-up. That's with the redevelopment in there, with the billboard gone, and the enhanced landscaping. And you can see this portion of the rendering has the stone veneer here on the columns, here around the vestibule, and then you can clearly see the door. Again here, with the enhanced landscaping from the other view from the north side in the actual median where we took the photograph. We have reviewed the criteria for a special use permit under Article 3, Section 24. The plan, as staff has stated, is consistent with the Comprehensive Plan and Land Development Code. It is compatible with the existing land use pattern in scale, height, and mass, both design, intensity, and character of activities in the North 441 and North 6th Street corridor. We do not feel that this will adversely affect the health, safety, and welfare of the public. In fact, it probably enhances it by relocating the store from where it currently is today to this much safer entrance here. Ingress and egress will allow for safe and convenient access for automobiles, and more importantly, too, bicycles and pedestrian mobility will be enhanced because we'll be completing the sidewalk network in this portion of 6th Street and 441. We don't have any off-street parking here, so item E isn't really relevant, but item F, noise, glare, and exterior lighting and odor effects will not negatively impact the surrounding properties. There's adequate provision for refuse. We have a walled dumpster enclosure area that will be in the south portion of the site near the car wash. Necessary public utilities are all available. We actually have to extend a small portion of a Gainesville Regional Utilities force main as part of the project, but public utilities are available proximate to the site, and they do have adequate capacity. Screening and bufferings are proposed of such type and dimension and character to improve the compatibility and harmony of the proposed use with the uses and structures around us. A lot of our uses are used car sale, metal building sales, U-Haul rentals and such, and so we feel we will probably be the best looking aesthetic new building up there on North 6th Street and 441. The hours of operation will not adversely affect or impact property zoned for single family. There are none adjacent to this or abutting, and any special requirements set forth in the Land Development Code for the particular use are met. And so under 30, Article 5.13, there are specific criteria, and we have met all of the criteria as demonstrated in the staff report. I'm not going to take the time to read this because staff has read this to you at the previous meeting and tonight. So both the site and the buildings comply with the city's Land Development Code requirements, and given the site's location and the challenging geometry of a triangular shaped piece of land, the site is complying to the maximum extent practicable with all Land Development Code and City of Gainesville design requirements. Your staff report before you tonight is recommending that you approve PB 19-00112 SUP with 4 conditions in there, proposing the sidewalk must connect, which we have said that we are going to do. Approving the special use permit is subject to the creation of a lot split, which we have ready to be processed with the city. The connection will be made to the newly created lot south of the proposed development. We will not leave that lot a fallow piece of property that can't be developed. And the height of the gas canopy will not exceed 15 feet in height. And staff stated tonight they wanted to add a condition about the billboard. I'm ambivalent about that. It is a required portion of the City of Gainesville's code, and generally I wouldn't condition an item with something that is a mandatory code provision, but if you want to put that in there, we have to comply with it anyway, so we would be happy to accept that. So with that, I'd like to conclude our presentation, and the applicant and all that are present tonight are respectfully requesting that the City Plan Board approve PB 19-00112 SUP for the proposed gas station with up to 12 fueling positions and an associated car wash on parcel 08002-000-000. Thank you, and I am here. Travis Haystay in our office, who is going to be the engineer of record, is here, and I saw that, I think, yes, Craig is here, and I know Ryan is here, so you have the entire CHW planning crew here. Thank you again.
Great, thank you, Mr. Diedenbach. Are there any questions from the board for the applicant? Mr. Blythe?
I've got one question on the landscape plan, and by the way, thank you, these updates are great. On the landscape plan where the billboard is, it looks like there's 3 or 4 existing trees that are scheduled to remain. In the renderings, it looks like maybe those trees come out and are replaced. Could you just clarify if those trees are to remain that are kind of under the billboard?
Sure, let me put that picture back. When we take this down, I think the trees that are in there are not really very healthy. So what we're going to do, Madam Chair, is we're going to evaluate them, and if they can be pruned and work in context, I don't think that these that are on the westernmost portion are the best out there because they've been kind of growing into the sign. So we're going to make a field determination on that. If they can be pruned and brought back to a healthy state, we'd let them stay in there. But if they're, as you can see, kind of stilted by the fact that they're underneath the like the catwalk on the billboard today, we'll remove them and probably replace with, you know, better quality trees in there.
Thank you, that answers the question.
Okay, any other questions for the applicant? Okay, I do have one quick question. Jerry, would you mind bringing up that slide that had the sidewalk shown one more time?
Sure.
And while you toggle to that, I have a question about the enhanced landscape that you showed. So it did obviously look a lot better with that rendering that showed those larger street trees and things, but are there any conditions that are going to require you to actually permit that enhanced landscaping that you just showed us, or would you be open to a condition requiring that rather than the code minimum?
So I brought up the picture here, and let me answer the landscaping question. No, there's not a condition in there that would be above and beyond code compliant. And likely what we would do is, if you want to put that in there as a condition, we have a graphic that shows that, and that would be fine. Or we'll just do that once the code compliant landscape is inspected and accepted.
Okay.
But if we say we're going to do it, we will be doing it.
Okay, my question here, I couldn't remember, was related to whether the sidewalk was going to continue on the lot split property, and it looks like it does. So that's what I was hoping to see, and I just couldn't remember how it was shown on the slide. So thank you for going back to this.
Sure. Yeah, there are gaps out there, Madam Chair. So what we're going to do is we're going to continue the sidewalk so it becomes gapless, but we're also going to band connect it from 6th Street to 441, both around the south side of the store and the north side of the store. I wouldn't think that there are many people that walk around that apex of that nose, but if you were working at U-Haul or if you were over here at Ride More Sports and you wanted to get, you know, a sandwich or soda or something like that, you might, you know, take your chances and run across 441. I'm sure that has happened in the past. We don't want to create an attractive nuisance here, since this is, fairly well-traveled, obviously portion of road, but we do want to ensure that the entire area is surrounded, making it pedestrian accessible, as well as delineating clearly what, functions happen in, whether they be in the paved shoulders, the bike lanes, or the travel lanes, or the sidewalks.
Okay, great, thank you. Any other questions before we bring it to the board for discussion? Okay, seeing none, actually, next is there anyone on the line for public comment on this item?
Not at this time, no.
No? Okay, then we'll bring it back to the board for discussion or a motion. Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Castillo, could you show us the elevations of the building? The sheet that had the 4 building elevations?
Sure, let me share my screen with you really quickly.
So we've got a couple of code provisions that relate to building fronts and building backs. One of them says that all fuel pumps have to be located to the rear or the side of the building. And the second one is that all parking areas are supposed to be located to the rear or the side of the building. So when we look at the building faces, we're supposed to know which is the front of the building, which is the back of the building, and which are the sides of the building. And if we figure that out, the back of the building is supposed to be next to the pumps, and it's supposed to be next to the parking. So when I look at these, a bunch of things point out. One, I think the ones on the bottom are obviously the sides, right? The proportions of the buildings, those are clearly the sides. So is the top one the front, or is the middle one the front? Well, the top one is symmetrical. It's got a lot more glazing than the next one. It's got numbers at the top for where the address goes. It's got the sign centered on the building. It looks like it's the front of the building. The second picture, it's not symmetrical. It's got a lot fewer windows. And it's got all this mechanical stuff on there. Typically, mechanical stuff doesn't go on the front of the building. That's something you put on the back or the side. So the top building is clearly the front of the building. Sorry, the top picture is clearly the front, and the middle picture is clearly the back. But if we relate these to the site plan, the pumps are next to the front of the building, and the parking's next to the front of the building. So what we've got is the back of the building fronting the intersection. And we talk about pedestrian mobility, and I think that's super important. There's also just the question of, is putting the mechanical equipment on the intersection, putting the back of the building on the intersection, it doesn't look good. Right? It's just between the two of these, and I appreciate the renderings the applicant provided, but between the two of these, clearly the building front that the code requires to be on the street is the one on the top. So I'm a no vote on the application. I think it's crystal clear that the building's on the site backwards, and that doesn't meet our code standards. We've got a bunch of code standards that say don't do it that way. And I know that we can do better. And I know that if we do comply with the code, we'll get a better result for folks that live in the city. So I'm down on the application.
Thank you, Mr. Hawkins. Any other comments?
I don't see any lights, so I'll make a motion that we deny the special use permit, which is PB-19-00112 SUV.
Okay, do we have a second for that motion? Not seeing a second. Mr. Newman.
I'd just like to ask, so what is, can you explain what are you looking for?
I think that the side that's the front should face the street, and the side that's the back should face the pumps in the parking area. And that's what the code doesn't, it's not ambiguous. I mean, if the building were rotated 180 degrees, it would match the code standard.
Can we ask a question of staff in terms of if there's a definition for front and back?
Yeah.
Is that a,
Mr. Persons?
So the code when that member Hawkins is talking about the design of fueling stations, and specifically it's the code standard says all gasoline and alternative fuel pumps and accessory automotive uses shall be located to the rear or side of buildings and at least 50 feet from the property line of any property zone residential. I think the way that staff looks at that is the pump locations as a relation to the building, not necessarily the building entrance. I think as you'll see when we have properties, particularly fueling stations that are designed with multiple frontages, that the design of the building typically incorporates two entrances, a front and a back, or sometimes identical entrances. And I think based on what we heard from the plan board's discussion at the last meeting, the plan board wanted the side that we're looking at, that faces the intersection, to look more like the side that faces the pumps. And I think that's what the applicant is endeavored to do, to essentially make the front and the back analogous in terms of the design and the orientation. If the board would like that second elevation to have more glazing, that could be a condition that you add to it. You could certainly make recommendations on the architecture, but in terms of the way staff looks at it, it's the building and the pumps, less so the entrances. Obviously, you know, what we tried to do is try to make those two elevations look and feel similar.
thank you. But there's no actual definition of, I mean, my perception could be different than someone else's, and I could say.
There's nothing that specific.
There's nothing as specific as one or the other, okay. Thank you.
Somebody, who's number 8? Is that you, Mr. Hawkins?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, sorry.
I just wanted to ask a question of Member Blythe. You're an architect. When you look at this picture, and if I ask the question, which is the front and which is the back, which elevation do you think's the front, which do you think's the back?
I would say out of context, like we're looking at it, I would say the top elevation looks more like a traditional front elevation. So out of context, I would agree with you. But from there, then it's site specific, right? So this is a really unique site, and what's there now is far less kind of visually valuable than what's on the page. I would agree that our plan, our mission is to get the best from every applicant we can. So in this instance, I would say, the functionality of the store, the safety of the store, things like that, tend to focus on glazing and where you can get glazing. So some of these decisions, and this is from my architectural background, as Mr. Diedenbach said, sometimes GRU tells you where they're going to put electrical devices, and a lot of times they do end up on the front of your building because that's the closest thing to where the utilities are coming from. So that one sometimes is actually out of your hands. They just tell you that's exactly where we're putting it, and you have to deal with it. I would say and this is maybe for the applicant as well, if the interior of the floor plan allowed for more glazing in that central area right underneath the Circle K sign on the second elevation down, that probably would help a lot. I think we're focusing on, number one, it's not symmetrical, so I think that throws off some of the look and feel. So if there was a way to get more glazing in that central area, even just one more window on each side of that bank of 4 windows, that could help maybe with the perception of glass, or of kind of creating a little more public facing side of things. But it's tough. I mean, in the real world, every elevation is kind of different. And sometimes, you know, just personally, we come up against a situation where the code says we should put front doors on it, and the reality is, in this case, they probably will use those. I go into Wawa's, and having the 2 doors is actually very useful. There are buildings in Gainesville that have been made worse, having to have a front door on an elevation that no one will ever use. It just creates an awkward kind of context. So there is some conflict in the code, my aesthetic kind of brain. But I would say my recommendation, looking at this as a whole, would be, can we get something a little bit extra in that center area? And if that was the case, maybe if we just define we'd like another 2 windows or a certain area of glass, or even an enhanced landscape element that maybe creates kind of a little more green wall feature or something that softens it a little bit right at that entry, that could help from an architectural perspective.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, this is Jerry. Could we ask Juan to take his screen share down? Because we can't see you. Y'all are about the size of a postage stamp. Thank you.
Okay, sorry. Okay, any other thoughts from board members?
This is Commissioner Hurst. I actually was, I hadn't noticed the aesthetics until you pointed out, so I appreciate that comment. And I think that when I first looked at this, the perception that I got on the corner facing, I guess it was the corner facing south, that was the front of the building because of the landscaping and the picket fences. Picket fences and landscaping and shrubs typically give, to me, from a real estate perspective, the front of the building. So I hadn't noticed that until you said that. So I think that's what the team was endeavoring to do, is to make that look like the front, not knowing obviously the context of putting it into the code. So I agree with James's comments as well, that if we give that additional glazing or additional glass storefront, I think that this would be a more favorable look, at least aesthetically, towards the front of the building, making it look like the front of the building.
Okay. Any other comments, or would someone like to make a motion?
Can I ask a question of the applicant?
Sure.
In terms of glazing area, Mr. Dienbach, code minimum versus what this is providing, it's hard to read the PDF that we've got. Do you know if this is meeting code minimum glass area or if it's exceeding it? Even if it's on average exceeding it?
Madam Chair, we have 25% glazing on the north side. And Andrew,
That 25% is code minimum.
yeah.
Okay.
So if 2 additional lights were added, we would be above code minimum on either side of that area behind, like where the registers and operation is.
Can you repeat the numbers again? The code minimum's 25 and we have how much?
And they have 25. So they have the code minimum right now.
Okay.
So 145 square feet of glass required, and we have 150, so we're just above that. 145 required, 150 on the wall, and there's 580 square feet of area there.
Mr. Hawkins.
And how much is on the facade facing the back?
Madam Chair, I don't have a calculation sheet on that one. Maybe Ryan does. I don't have that sheet here.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yeah, if Ryan has it, let us know. If somebody has that information.
He's watching. He'll text me if he does.
Okay.
We didn't actually calculate the interior facade because it wasn't required to have glazing. So I don't have that number in front of me. The glazing calculation that Jerry quoted, the minimum 145 square feet and total of 150 square feet does not include that was from the original submittal, and does not include the 4 panes to the far left. So we actually well exceed the minimum requirement now.
That's right. Sorry, you're correct. I didn't see that you didn't have those additional windows on there, Ryan.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we have an additional probably 75 square feet. So 145 is required. We probably have 150 plus 75. We have 225 now.
Thank you.
So to answer member Blythe's question,
Thank you.
we're well above. We're at 38% glazing now with 25% required.
And do you have an idea on the backside or no?
I don't, and I don't have that sheet, Madam Chair.
Okay.
And Ryan, like Ryan said, since it was an interior, we didn't calculate the interior yet.
Okay. Thank you. Coming back to the board. If anyone is willing to make a motion. Oh, number 6. Is that Mrs. Corrigato?
Yes, Corrigato. I did have one or a couple questions actually. So, one concern, which I don't think this has been mentioned, I'm sorry if y'all already had this discussion at the prior meeting, was kind of about traffic and visibility and pedestrian and cyclist safety in this area. Just from personal experience, cycling down this particular intersection can be a little scary just because you're intersecting with 6th Street and I think you lose the bike lane for a little while. So it does concern me to think about more cars coming in and out of this particular area now. So I know you will be completing that sidewalk in that specific area. So I guess my question is more so, will there be any signage about pedestrians or cyclists as cars are coming in and out of that particular area, and, how safe is it to be walking around there? I know you mentioned, someone might be wanting to come over to grab lunch one day, is it even safe to be walking around, there? So I'm wondering, so that's just one concern. And then the other is, I noticed that it mentions that the approval of this permit is contingent on approval of the lot split, and that they would be able to use that for future use. So my question is what that future use would be, and would the board have to approve that?
Okay. Well, Madam Chair, I'd be happy to address that. Let me put my screen share back up there. And so, as stated, the sidewalks today stop in that apex of the curve there, and so we're facing that apex there. I too question, as the plan board member just stated, the safety of somebody wanting to run across from like Ridemore or walk down the sidewalk and then just walk across there. DOT has not yet opined on the actual signage pattern in here. At the entrance points on ours, we would definitely have signage control plans that would show, and if I click to this, we would have full stop bars placed there, and there would be directional signage that would encourage the driver to make the right-hand turn here. There's not a left out of here, so your visibility would be clear for somebody approaching from the south. We would be making modifications. We do know this much so far from our initial meetings with FDOT, that we would be creating a dedicated slip and turn lane here that would function as a holding point where drivers could sit in this turn lane prior to crossing the northbound lanes of 441 to wait for a proper gap in traffic. So we will be signing the entrance and exit points here. To the second portion of the question, we don't have a seller there, but a condition of the SUP in response to the plan board member's question is that internal connectivity would occur off of this drive here. And so another driveway wouldn't be created just a few feet away, which would create a hazard, obviously, having two driveways so close together. That access to this parcel, if it were to become something like a restaurant or a retail store, it would be fed off of a common driveway access here. So that would help clean this up. These are the approximate locations today of the two driveways that serve the mobile home sales that were there previously on this corner piece of property. And it's a challenge because the property is shaped like a triangle with a nose at the apex of two state roads. Good questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Diedenbach. Bringing it back to Lord for a motion, if someone's willing. Mr. Ackerman.
I have a comment, and then I'll
You may need to turn your.
One,
Bob, you gotta speak up.
I'm sorry, what?
Speak up.
Your microphone was off for a second.
Oh, I'm sorry, thank you. One, obviously, this is a difficult piece of property. The intent to have something that looks more like a front than a back facing all the traffic that comes in, I think to some extent has been achieved. Making it a specific distinction that every building has a front and every building has a back, that tends to be true on a straight street, but it's going to be a lot more difficult in this situation. And I think the attempt that's been made is more than adequate to present a front type face towards it, particularly with the landscaping. The second issue that I have is that I'm not sure if anybody else has been in retail, but I have been, and it's critical that I mean, it's very difficult to have a retail store that's a glass box. It's not impossible, but it very, very much restricts your ability to have layout inside. And this store is going to have coolers, it's going to have all kinds of things. And if we require that basically the north and south elevations be all glass, I think it's going to be very, very difficult for them to site the kind of fixtures that they need to do to have this thing work. With that said, I really appreciate that we went back and looked, and I thank Thomas for that, and got rid of the sign, which I think was definitely a major detriment. I appreciate the redesign on the front. I understand why I mean, really, they've taken most of the back of the house stuff and disguised it or moved it. And the electrical boxes, I don't really know, but they may or may not be required by GRU, but the fact that they're there doesn't mean that they can't be disguised, and they seem to be adequately disguised. And so with that, I would move that we approve, have to get my glasses, sorry. Petition PB-19-00112 SUP. Based on the information we have, with the modifications that we have, I would also add the condition that the enhanced landscaping that's been demonstrated here is a required element of this, and that all the other conditions that are in the staff report would be implemented also.
Okay. Do we have a second to Mr. Ackerman's motion? Mr. Newman?
I'll second that.
Okay, great.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
Good. Thank you. I just wanted to clarify in terms of some of the conditions that the board talked about. So about the additional side lights or the additional glazing, is that part of the motion? Okay. And then in terms of the enhanced landscaping, just so, because we're going to have to come back and review this after this. From what it sounds like, some of the enhanced landscaping on the front have some larger trees. Is that, so one suggestion I would have is maybe something that's easy for staff to be able to apply is just to change out the 30-gallon minimum for those trees to a 60-gallon size along on the front of the building there at the intersection. That'll ensure that the trees are larger, and it'll make sure that we're all on the same page moving forward.
There was also on the landscape plan that they showed us, and it sort of had planting in red. I don't think that was required by code either. So I think the trees and what they sort of showed in red, we wanted to capture both of those. That was what I sort of intended with my comment. So,
And that's what I was
but-
intending, is that the enhanced landscaping that was shown by Mr. Wiedenbach would be incorporated into the special use permit. I'm a little reluctant to say what size.
And that's fine. I just wanted to have that, just to make sure that we understand what's.
Okay, do you understand?
Yep.
Okay, then I think we have a motion and a second.
Okay, and I might ask staff to do a roll call vote on this one, because I'm not sure if the new members had reviewed the last meeting and are planning to vote. Ms. McMillan, would you mind doing a roll call vote on this one?
Okay, Board Member Newman? Hawkins?
No.
Hurst?
Aye.
Ackerman?
Yes.
Sutton?
Yes.
Blythe?
Yes.
And Corrigato? Okay. Okay, so
Okay,
two
I
members
believe that was
abstaining.
4-1 with 2 abstaining.
Three yes, 2 abstain, 1 no.
Okay, yep. No.
No, there's
There
four.
was 4
there's
yeses,
4 yes.
1 no.
Oh, sorry about that, I didn't write the first one down,
4-1
you're right.
and 2 abstaining.
Yeah,
Okay,
sorry
thank
about
you.
Which,
Okay,
which
thank-
means the motion passes.
yes. Thank you for coming back to us on that one and sort of bearing with us and making some of those changes. I think it's going to be a much better project for, the amendments that have been made. So, thank you.
You're very welcome, Madam Chair. We value your input and the assistance that you provide us. These are never easy, and we always believe that the best made plans are made with many hands, so we appreciate yours.
Yep. Have a good evening.
Oh, we're staying.
Oh, okay. I'm not surprised.
We're staying for item 2.
Staff, can you read the next item
Yes.
under new business into the record, please?
Petition PB-20-159 TCH, City of Gainesville text amendment to the Land Development Code to modify requirements of the neighborhood workshop process requiring submittal of a public participation report. And if we could get the presentation pulled up by Elizabeth, who is running the meeting. Should be pulling it up momentarily here.
Can I just ask one question, and maybe you're going to cover this in the intro, but was this specifically on our list of items that we come together with the city commission on? So this is one of those items that we're kind of moving through?
Yes,
Okay.
the neighborhood workshop item overall and public participation process.
Okay, great, thank you. I thought so, but I wanted to make sure.
All right. Okay, so good evening. Brittany McMullen, planner with Department of Sustainable Development. So this proposed text change is in response to the City Commission and the Plan Board asking staff to look into updating the development review and neighborhood workshop process to see if there are any opportunities for more neighbor involvement. So as part of this effort, staff is proposing to require that the applicant provide a public participation report. So currently for neighborhood workshops, applicants must submit minutes from the neighborhood workshop whenever the neighborhood workshop is required. And those workshops are required for major development plans and most types of development applications that occur, especially the larger applications. So the public participation report basically would require a more in-depth explanation of the public participation efforts that were made and ask the applicant to address issues that may have been brought up. So if we can go to the next slide. Currently, section 30-3.47 is currently titled neighborhood workshops. We would propose to change this to public participation plan, which includes requiring the submittal of a public participation report. And that would still require holding a neighborhood workshop and supplying minutes from that workshop. So if we go to the next slide, this slide shows you what the code would outline in terms of the specific contents of the report. It's probably hard for you to see up on that screen, but you should have all this information in your backup. So a neighborhood workshop would still be required. The report would need to include the results of that workshop. And the report would need to include things like identifying residents, property owners, interested parties, and others that may be affected by the application. It asks the applicant to talk about how those parties would be informed of any substantive changes to the application. And also asks for details on how they involved the public in the process before applying. A description of kind of where interested parties reside, or kind of where they're coming from. It should also summarize the substance of concerns, issues, and problems expressed during the process, describe how the applicant has addressed those concerns, and identify which concerns, issues, and problems the applicant is unwilling or unable to address, if any, and stating why. So if we go to the next slide, the second part of this code change involves requiring additional noticing for neighborhood workshops. So one proposed change is to require that the property in question be posted with a sign prior to the neighborhood workshop occurring. So this would provide neighbors with information on the workshop. Anybody that passes by the property, this is a pretty easy change that we can make to the code. If we go to the next slide, this is just an example. What staff is currently looking at, the commission had asked us to look at how staff could be involved with advertising these neighborhood workshops more, and letting the public, trying to give the public more opportunities to participate. So what we're talking about internally is creating a map or some sort of app, and it could even be integrated into this existing developments map that we have on the city's webpage now, where we would provide information on upcoming neighborhood workshops, and it could be like an interactive map that people could look at and, you know, see where things are going on. Of course, that's going to involve, you know, discussions about timing and when do we need all the information and things like that. So that's what we want to talk to you about tonight and get your feedback on, and see what you think. And then in addition to that, I know the plan board had discussed requiring major development plans to go before the development review board for review as part of the enhanced public participation process. That could be included, or we would want to include that with this text change. If you do want to move forward with that, you would just want to include that in your motion to recommend for the commission when we take this to them.
Madam Chair, if I could just add, some of the ideas on the public participation plan idea actually came from the city manager's office, because based on some of his experiences working in some of the other cities, they've used this sort of model. It's not dissimilar from our neighborhood workshop, but it would have a little bit more of a narrative element and sort of touch some of the boxes in terms of sort of what went on at the workshop. And we get a lot of feedback from, and as you guys have experienced, from residents when they come to the meeting. They're like, well, we had a workshop, but, this wasn't talked about or that wasn't talked about. And I think having a plan with some clear criteria in terms of what type of information needs to be covered and what gets submitted to the city would help both staff hear any issues that have been raised by some of the adjacent residents, but also I think the board in terms of deliberating on decisions and being able to look at clearly sort of, here's where the concerns were raised at the workshop, here's how they've been addressed. mean, most of the firms here in town do a lot of that already. It's just not necessarily called out in the city's code. So that was part of the intent. And I think as Ms. McMullen pointed out, ultimately what we're trying to get to is having a place on the city's website, either as part of the development projects map, where not only could a citizen go to that and see, you know, in a live fashion where neighborhood workshops are occurring, but also, as I think as you saw, there's a aspect of having the ability to have virtual workshops, which we've been doing this whole past year. The county just amended their code to allow virtual workshops moving forward, regardless of, you know, pandemic situations. What we've heard is that the virtual workshop gives more opportunity for people to attend these that may otherwise not be able to actually show up in person because of childcare or just life issues. So I think having that virtual element also gives the city the ability to potentially host the links, you know, embed the links in our interactive map. So there would be an easier place for a citizen to be able to come to one place and find out what's going on in the city, where neighborhood workshops happening. The addition of the posted notice has also been something that we've done with all the firms because of the virtual limitations that we've had in this past year. When the city allowed virtual workshops, we also asked that firms post the signs on the property for the workshop, and that's been going on. I think it's been successful, so we just want to put that into code as well. So, and I would say if depending on the discussions tonight, if there was changes that the board wanted to see or things that we wanted to bring back, we also have our meeting at the end of this month, so we can bring back a finalized copy of the language for you at that point. So you don't feel like you necessarily need to make a final motion tonight.
Thank you. Does anyone want to ask questions of staff?
I think Mr. Hawkins.
We've got a couple people here.
I have a question.
For Mr. Persons. Thank you, Madam Chair. First, a general comment, as I love that we're talking about this. I think this is a really tough thing to crack. I might have said this at a meeting in the fall, but when I was at 1,000 Friends of Florida, we got more questions about public participation than anything else. And I never felt like I had great answers to give people. And we found a lot of resources, but it's a tough nut to crack. So, but I think these are really positive changes. My one question, Mr. Persons, is it looks like the way that I read this, somebody would need to submit a public participation plan and have it approved by the city before they could submit an application. Can you kind of describe what that looks like? Is that I see Ms. Sutton kind of shaking her head a little bit, and that was a little bit my thought. Is it sounds like it might be procedurally complex. Can you kind of describe what you're imagining?
We talked about that, and I think the where we are, at least as staff, is that we don't necessarily want to be in a position where we are like approving or denying public participation plans. What we're asking for is that the firms, right now, what I would say in terms of the way the sort of neighborhood workshop process starts is that a firm or typically like a coordinator at a firm will contact the city and say, hey, I need mailing labels for this parcel or this, and then we'll provide mailing labels. And that is essentially the only sort of point of interaction right now between the city and a design firm that's doing a neighborhood workshop. I think what we're talking about is essentially not having the city be the sort of gatekeeper, but that there's a requirement that the firm consult with us up front, and if there are any additional communities or any additional special sort of circumstances with the land, that we say, well, it would be great if you include, this other, area or this adjacent neighborhood that may be outside of the 400 feet. Then there would be an ability for the city and the applicant to have that kind of discussion. But the way we're thinking about it is not necessarily, not in the way that the city is like, approving or denying a public participation plan, like upfront. Good for all the reasons that I think you mentioned, is that we wouldn't want to have to deal with the logistics, and it will necessarily, like, oftentimes we're not running the show in terms of when that workshop would have to happen, and so we want to sort of leave that up to the private agents.
Madam Chair, I like the approach that Mr. Persons just described better than the approach that's currently in the draft.
Mm-hmm.
So I agree, and I was going to ask Mr. Persons, do you see that conversation with staff happening at first step meetings? Because that's really when staff typically finds out what
Right.
is proposed for the parcel. And typically, I would say first step meetings occur before neighborhood meetings, but that may not always be the case. I mean, in my experience, it is.
Right.
But typically, we want to feel staff out before we go through the expense of holding a neighborhood meeting. So do you see this being incorporated into that conversation?
I think
At
it
the
could
first step
be,
meeting?
yeah, and I think part of it, like in addition to sort of the coordination, I think the first step meeting is probably a good place for it. And then for those odd ones that maybe, there's a first step or a neighborhood workshops that occur before a first step, then we could amend the code to have it, say that you just need to liaise with the city before holding the workshop, or before the required deadline for for any posted notice or any advertisement in the paper. But I think the other sort of intent is, if firms decide to do the virtual workshop, we want to also incorporate those in any like in-person workshops that may occur, in the next year. Although it still seems really alien to be able to incorporate that information into any virtual platform that we do. So we want to know where the workshop's going to occur, when it's going to occur, how members of the public who may be interested in attending can attend, and we can put that on our website as well. So there's got to be some like discussion back and forth between the city. So I think that's good comments, and we can definitely take a shot at amending some of the language just to make sure that we're clear on where we're coming from.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Ackerman.
I have a couple of comments. This is an area that I'm in favor of robust communication with people that are affected at the earliest possible stage, and I've often thought that the way we do it now is sufficiently short, particularly if you're a neighborhood and you now have to organize and you have less than 7 or 8 days to do that. And that's always struck me as fundamentally unbalanced, given that some developer has been working with the staff for 6 or 8 months. And so I would like to ensure that that we inform people as early as possible that something is at least in the works. And I understand the problem with that, because if I come to you for first step, I might decide I'm not going to do it anymore. You don't want to have the notices that just get people up in a frenzy before they know what's going on. But I do think that some early point that we ought to do that. The other issue I have with workshops is that if they have a workshop, and I can't remember now how long ago you could have had a workshop, but I know in the past we've had petitioners come and say we had that workshop, a year ago or 9 months ago, and most people had decided that went away. And so I would like 2 things. One, that the workshop be within a recent enough time that people are aware that this is a live project. And then the other issue I have is that we have some method of people being able to sign up and be informed as this moves through the process, either by email or on a website or something like that. The city is incredibly opaque when you try to contact them. It's very difficult to find who to talk to, and you can run away until you dive out a window. I mean, it's really difficult. And so I think it's important that people say, I'm interested in this project and I want to be informed every time it happens. The other thing is, sometime in the past, I thought this says we're gonna notify people who are property owners within 400 feet. Didn't we have a process for notifying tenants also?
We do. We actually do that today. We notify both property owners and residents. It's not in code, and it certainly could be as part of this.
Well, I think it's important that we notify people who live in the area affected. I know we own some buildings in Gainesville, and those notices go to our office in Ocala, and quite frankly, my brother does not read them, and I don't even know about stuff that's gonna affect it. It's nuts, you know, and that happens an awful lot.
Right.
So I would like that we include tenants. The other thing, the methods of getting the communication to people is really difficult, and I think we need to use a lot of different ways to do it. The newspaper publication is beyond worthless. Nobody reads that. Nobody sees it. It's this big. It's buried somewhere. And I mean, I guess you have to do it, but I don't think we should consider that to be notification of anybody who cares. And so I would like to make sure that probably the best way to notify people is signage on the property, and I would like to see signage be maybe a little more robust and a little more long-lasting. I mean, all those signs I go by all the time. The one on this project we just did, you know, was flopped over on the sidewalk almost as soon as it went up, and I think that's a big problem. So I think we need to come up with some kind of realistic, long-lasting signage, and that will keep people also know that this is still a live one. I think my recollection is we do not notify people or post signage for right-of-way closures, and I think we ought to do that. I think we ought to include notification for right-of-way closures, and I think we should absolutely sign right-of-way closures. Now, I understand sometimes that's the city sometimes, but even so, you know, people, I mean, I've seen a lot of very unhappy people who's like, where the hell did this come from? And we're not obligated to do it, and I think that's unfair, because sometimes they're important, sometimes they're not. I'm also, all of these are restricted to things that require board approval. What happens, any notifications? No?
No. No, they're even projects that don't require board approval still get neighborhood workshops. Even
Okay,
everything that was getting neighborhood workshops before still gets a neighborhood workshop.
Okay, and is that, so in the case where Seminary Lane, which theoretically they met the requirements and did not need board approval, they still had neighborhood workshops?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Okay. Okay, that's most of my comments then.
Okay.
And I would be more in favor of you guys reworking this and bringing it back the next time.
Mr. Newman.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. So some of my questions kind of got answered about, well, first of all, one comment is, if you change this and you call it, instead of neighborhood workshop, to public participation plan, like I'm thinking, all right, well, I need a plan, but that's not what this really is. So, I mean, and so there's gonna be a report, but there's not a plan. And so I just wonder if we just want to be kind of careful about what we call this. So we can call it public participation or public notification. And so just kind of be careful about that as when I read it. I agree with a lot of things that have been said. I think one of the things that I think in it starts to get to it, but you know, what is the intent of this? And so, you know, we want to provide, we want to sort of identify, we want to make sure that people are being notified and all, you know, and as inclusively as we can. But I also think that we need to be that those people who are being notified also need to be made aware about what they are actually able to participate in and when. So, you know, so again, you know, that we're giving an opportunity, we want to hear from the public, or we want the applicants to be able to hear what the public has to sort of say. But I also think it needs to be really be clear that you know, that there is, that the applicant, you know, and we've asked for that, can say, yes, you know, we're addressing it this way, or we're not sort of addressing it. But, you know, if we're going to be sort of setting expectations for the public to participate, we have to be very, very clear as to what that actually sort of means. And then the other thing too is I think it's important, you know, we have these neighborhood workshops, and I think this gets to, you know, one we're just trying to sort of let people know, but I think we also need to be considerate, you know, of multiple modes of where people can provide sort of input and make sure that that's clear. So, you know, one is at the workshop, you know, so people, but I would also encourage, you know, the report or the applicants to make sure that at a workshop that, you know, if people want to provide sort of verbal input, they can. If they want to provide sort of written input, they can. That there's a period of time, maybe after the workshop, that they could provide something, you know, that, so, because essentially there are people who come to these meetings who may not be able to process or react, or they want some time to sort of think about it. So if we're gonna, so I think that we need to, if we're gonna, you know, go at this, we need to try to think that that we're going to provide multiple modes and multiple periods of time, multiple opportunities for people to provide that. So, I mean, I think this is a great start, and but those are my kind of main comments, that, you know, to try to sort of think this thing through. And if it is a public participation plan or whatever, that we try to sort of reflect the different, you know, what is the intent of this, you know, notification, and then multiple ways and opportunities for the people to provide that. And I also think it's also important that maybe it sort of needs to be stated somewhere here, is that, again, they can, another part of public participation is they can come to these meetings, and that they can, you know, that they can speak, they can provide sort of comments at these meetings in addition just to the neighborhood sort of workshops. So, you know, all the points in time where people, members of the public, can have an opportunity to sort of learn and also provide input, I think that should be reflected in the text also. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Hurst.
Yeah, first of all, I'm going.
Sorry, learning the new systems. First of all, I love the idea of the Zoom. I don't think that an absence of physical presence is an absence of care. I think there's very real concerns as far as getting to meetings, you know, childcare, jobs, what have you. So I love the opportunity to visit via Zoom. And all those are actually things that affect me personally, so I know that they're very real. As far as notification, is there a way possibly for the city to use geofencing technology, whereby you kind of put a radius around the particular site and be able to communicate via text or whatever the medium is? But have you guys looked into geofencing by any chance?
Just for the record, I did not put Mr. Hurst up to talk about this, but yes, that's been like my pipe dream for a long time, and we've talked about it using like a system like similar to kind of Everbridge or other types of geofence technologies where essentially like residents or neighbors could sign up for like getting notification, and then when the city populates like our development projects map, or when we send out that notification, there's software out there that essentially would allow somebody to create their own map. Like, so I want to be notified, you know, over here, and when things happen over here and over here. And then when the city populates it, they sort of passively get that information fed to them. And there are a number of ways to do it, and we've been discussing that internally in the city and trying to coordinate with GRU, who's also looking at that for like when a utility goes out or similar things. So yeah, that's definitely on the horizon, and we've been having you know, lots of meetings and talking about that. The city is also rolling out a CRM platform, a customer resource management platform, which will do something sort of similar to that. It's not as like robust as I think we're thinking about, but yes, it's definitely on the horizon. I think what you saw in terms of like incorporating neighborhood workshops into some of our interactive mapping that we're already doing is a sort of a step in that direction. But ultimately, we don't want we're trying to get to a place where a neighbor who's interested in something that's going on in the city doesn't have to navigate to a website, know how to look at a map, like know how to process this information. Because just leading to somebody to a map, if they're not familiar with what they're looking at, it's, you know, it's still kind of like Greek. So ultimately, we want to get to a place where somebody can sign up, or that my staff can go out and have neighborhood discussions outside of a project, just meet with neighborhoods like we were doing pre-pandemic, and talk to residents and get them sort of signed up to something like this, so then they could passively receive information without having to, like, you know, go to the city and say, hey, what's going on? You know, they'll just get information based on their whatever preferences that they set. So yes, thank you. It's a good thought.
Okay, Mr. Hawkins.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've got a couple of comments, and between Mr. Ackerman and Mr. Newman, a bunch of them were covered. So I'll just bullet point those when I get to them. I won't go into a lot of detail. But I had a couple other that I'd talk about for a second. In paragraph A3, it says that one of the purposes of the plan would be to facilitate communication between the applicant and appointed and elected officials. This is kind of a sort of a fine point, but because we're a quasi-judicial board, it should, and the commission is too when it considers development applications or rezonings, we should be a little more careful with that language and make sure that it's about engaging everyone, perhaps also including appointed officials, but that we're not trying to facilitate communication that happens outside of a hearing. Under paragraph B, where it says applicability, I very much agree with Member Ackerman about adding rights-of-way vacations. I would also add master plans and suggest that master plans would also be appropriate for a public participation report and a neighborhood workshop. I think they already have a neighborhood workshop. But
They do, yeah. And I think, sorry not to interrupt, that was one of the things I was trying to write down everything that Bob was saying, but he kept going and going and going with good ideas. So, but I think what you saw before when Yvette sort of ran through it, there was another sheet which had the different development project types and whether or not they received a neighborhood workshop. And we did, the draft that we had talked about before did have a neighborhood workshop required for right-of-way vacations, because that was a gap that we had. So when we bring that back at the end of the month, we'll make sure that we have the full sort of package for you.
okay, and that's referring to the table with rapid, intermediate,
Yep.
major?
Yep.
Okay, so that's an excellent idea. And I would also suggest one change to that, which is, and I know we've talked about it a little bit before, so I know we're not gonna have perfect consensus, but maybe we have a majority that thinks we should get DRB review for intermediate and major projects. So I very strongly believe that. I think that I've been observing our process for about 15 years, and I think that it's really tough to have this balance between the most efficient review and the review that gets the outcomes that are most consistent with what our standards are. And we need to come back towards applications meeting standards and more attention. And I think the answer to get that more attention is DRB review for intermediate and major projects. But we can talk about that, but when we come back and we're looking at 30.45 or 3.45, I'd want us to look at that too. So to have some draft language there so we can make a decision on it. On page 2, we already talked about all this stuff. It has to do with kind of the process and whether there's a pre-approval by staff. All the way at the very last paragraph, C3, under virtual workshops, paragraph 3, it ends with the statement in the last line that the applicant would need to provide materials in the notification packet, which I think is a great idea, so that anybody that gets notice of the meeting is going to get the PowerPoint or images, but notification packets not used elsewhere. So I don't want to. What I'm thinking this means is that those images would be included in the published notice, the posted notice, whatever, right? So you're going to post those images on the site if you're going to do a virtual meeting. But I'd want to make that clear. So I'd want to know what that notification packet is. As an aside, Mr. Ackerman mentioned newspapers. The state only requires published notice for comp plan amendments. So we could stop advertising other land development approvals if we wanted to.
That was on my list to bring up as well. I said, it's a local creation, this
Yeah.
neighborhood workshop, so if we don't think that advertising in the paper is reaching the audience we want, and there are other tools available now, like that we're not bound to continuing to do neighborhood, or continuing to do.
So we've just done the deck now for newspapers.
I still read the Sun online, but I can't remember the last time I saw a neighborhood workshop notice.
No,
in the
no,
Sun,
nobody
so.
sees them.
Yeah.
It's a waste.
So then I've got two last points that echo mostly really what Mr. Ackerman said. Maybe these are even more than bullet points. People do need to be able to access the review process while it's ongoing, and I don't know the best way to do that. I have used the online system, and it's been a few years since I spent a lot of time in it, but when I go back to look at it again, it's still completely opaque to me. You require a login, I don't know who to call, I don't know, right? Somebody should be able to log into that anywhere, any person who's interested in Gainesville processes, and see what public records are located there. And so I don't know how to figure that out, but that should be one of the things, like Mr. Newman said, that people can learn about at the neighborhood workshop. It could be on the neighborhood workshop notice. For more info, go to cityofgainesville.org, and we've got an FAQ page. And so people can get that. And then the last one is, and this is a little, I think this is a little wonky. I didn't realize until recently that the technical review committee makes a lot of final decisions with input from multiple staff members that happen all in our online review system. So it's not possible for people to know what's going on with the decision. And I think we have to figure that out. And on one hand, we've got all these public meetings requirements that probably require our TRC to actually have a meeting to make the decision. I know the county does this. The TRC meets in a building somewhere in the county administration building and actually votes on these things. And that makes sense. I don't know that it has to be that way, but if we want people to be able to participate, if a group of staff people is making a decision on an application, there needs to be an opportunity for the public to be involved in that. And maybe that's a different conversation in this code amendment, but I wanted to highlight it because it's obviously related. So those would be my requests for when we get revised language back. Would be everything except maybe not the TRC. I mean, that's a longer conversation. But.
I agree with the TRC because they're clearly making decisions that nobody participates but staff.
I did want to, I see, I think Mr. Blythe has light on too, or maybe it was Sophia. I'll speak at the end.
So I have a handful of comments. I agree with a lot of what has been said, but not everything that's been said. I think I have a little bit of a different perspective because I actually deal with hosting these and publishing them and answering phone calls pretty regularly. I think, there's a unique divide between what's happening in the city process and once the application gets submitted and how it's handled by city staff and the city process versus what we're requiring of applicants prior to submittal. And so I think some of this is trying to blend that together right now, and I think we should talk about those two things separately, although they're related. So my feedback is primarily about making it more clear what our expectations of applicants are. I think I agree. I had a problem with this A3 and the communication between the applicant, interested parties, city staff, appointed and elected officials, partially because that may not be allowed on certain items, but also communication between the applicant and city staff throughout the review process becomes things like the TRC meetings, first step meetings, GRU project meetings, and so sort of in my mind is a question of, am I starting to have to turn in my notes from GRU project meetings because we were talking to staff about a project? I don't think that's the intent here. I think 3 needs to be cleaned up a little bit. I agree with the right-of-way vacations. I think we've seen that happen a number of times. I think we need to look at the process there. I agree with if we are going to be posting properties, coming up with a more standardized sign. Similar right now, you know, the different firms in town are sort of making makeshift ones because it's a new requirement, and that may be something that the city needs to start to provide, like they do for development plans, and for, you know, public hearings when we have those. Let me see. Under the report, and then talking about, it's under 1A, 1B, how we're going to define a substantive change to the plans and when that needs to be communicated. I think substantive might mean different things to different people, and so being really clear about that and when is that going to be triggered and who's going to decide that that's triggered is something we may need to define a little bit better. Let's see. I agree with like the tenants, and I was wondering where that was because I thought we were doing that already. So, you know, that should be captured here. It's not clear to me in the way this is written, and I think it's just because we sort of added the virtual workshops piece at the end. But are we giving people the option between an in-person workshop and a virtual workshop? Are we, you know, I definitely don't want to be at a point where we're requiring both. It's just not clear in this language that they have the choice between one or another. And I think requiring this video or audio recording of an in-person meeting might be difficult. That's really easy on Zoom. You just set it to record the meeting, but in person, you know, requiring a video camera or, you know, microphones for people in the audience to be able to be heard when they're asking questions, that could be pretty difficult. So I think we just need to make it more clear and maybe only require the recording for virtual meetings. The other concern I have is about mailing the materials. So a lot of times PowerPoints and things for neighborhood meetings aren't finalized until very close to when the neighborhood meeting's held. It's usually not finalized 2 weeks ahead of time because you want to give people the latest information that you have at the time of the meeting. So I have concerns about mailing the graphics, maps, any of that. You do have to, we typically include some kind of aerial map, at least showing the location of the project and a description of what's happening and what we're proposing on the mailed notices. But I think asking to send the entire PowerPoint and all of these materials is a little bit onerous, and I think what you're going to get out of that is less material presented at these meetings because that was what was available at the time of the mailing, and I don't think that's the direction we want to go. So having those materials available upon request, we have people regularly call and email us asking us for materials, and that's, you know, stated on the notices as well that they can request them, as well as once things are submitted, people will request copies of them because at that point the whole application is public record. So people can also request that. They get a full copy of everything once it's submitted, and city staff would furnish them the same. So I have concerns about providing too much information in the mailing just because I think that it's going to cut down on the amount of information provided at all because it's really going to be 2-week-old information and not the latest. I have a lot of little markups, and I'll probably email staff with some of that, but those are a lot of my big points.
And she mentioned one that I think is very important, is that we have some standard for triggering a substantial or major change in a plan. I remember some years ago that project at the corner of 53rd and 43rd where they added an emergency hospital after the plan. People were pretty
and I think
exercised.
I believe there are there's some section of code maybe around special use permits or something where there's some criteria for when like what would trip sort of a revised special use permit or revision. So we can look at that and maybe make some like figure out some analogous language that would that we could use to sort of delineate what a substantive change is. But that was the project that I was thinking of as well, when there was a pretty big change after the neighborhood workshop.
Yeah.
Okay. Any other comments from the board before we go to public comment? Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, so I had a few comments. Okay, so I guess one thing I noticed at the very end under virtual workshops, it doesn't look like it specifies how far in advance you notify them, unless that's my mistake for not interpreting that that's already kind of, I guess, suggested by It looks like D, Part A, Part 2, or you need at least 15 calendar days, but if we can include that. But I also wanted to suggest that we give people more time. People need time to take off from work if needed and stuff, so I think it should be at least 3 weeks, if not 4 weeks in advance. I also think that when we give them these notifications, whether it's, in the mail or posted on the lot, that there should be a way, as Hurst mentioned, that we could notify them in some way, like maybe they text a number and we update them as to when the meeting is happening, if they choose to opt into that, just as a means of communication. And also, showing a website or some place where all this information is available. So maybe we're not mailing it to them, but there's a place where they can go online, and this should be easily accessible to people through some online means. I also think that we should be notifying people of options to be engaged if they can't show up to that workshop. Maybe giving them the dates of a meeting or hearing if that's available, or as it becomes available, notifying those people as well so they don't miss the window if they can't attend a workshop. We still want to make sure they're being engaged. I also thought of houseless neighbors in certain regions. I know we talked about tenants and property owners, but there are, areas where houseless neighbors frequent, and I think they should be alerted if some significant development is being proposed. So I asked that they maybe be included in who we're notifying of these different workshops. And then, as you mentioned, Mrs. Sutton, about, being clear about what we're expecting of applicants, I feel like providing some kind of a guiding, model of engagement or checklist per se when it comes to engagement and equity in this whole participation process could be helpful. I obviously don't have that experience with conducting as many meetings as some of you all might, but I feel like if we want to make sure from the city's perspective, when we're talking about equity and what we're hoping to achieve with engaging the public, maybe providing to these applicants, I guess maybe some expectations or guidance with this participation process, and what the city might be looking for, especially since we're asking for a report. Maybe we provide some structure in that report to them, so we're not getting all different kinds of looking reports from people, but there's some kind of structure and organization, so there's some order, more or less, to those reports. And then I did have one question about what's posted on these lots. I feel like every time I see a notice of a meeting or some proposed development on a site, it usually talks about maybe like the plan board meeting that's going to happen. I don't know that I've ever seen one of a workshop that's going to happen, so I was just curious what that actual signage on the property looks like and what we're planning to do there.
So I think as Member Sutton pointed out, right now it's not been a requirement. It's not currently a requirement in the city's code to post signs for neighborhood workshops. During the pandemic, that's what we've asked applicants to do as part of holding virtual workshops as well. So it sounds like it's been sort of somewhat of a makeshift signs. We as Stephanie pointed out, the city has our own public hearing signs that we've designed in-house, and those are the yellow, the blue, and the green signs. We can certainly design a neighborhood workshop sign, that would look similar. We obviously wouldn't put our city logo on it since it's not, a city meeting. And we can make a design file available and maybe think about sort of durability. Those signs are not inexpensive to do. They look really beautiful, and we had to go sort of through a couple iterations to find a material that doesn't melt in the rain. So I think if the city were to design it and provide it, we would probably need to look at because currently we don't charge for anything like that. So that's something that we would need to look at, so we're not bleeding money out of the Department of the Signs. So anyway, but we could certainly do a lot of the design work and have a standardized neighborhood workshop if this gets moved forward.
Okay, any other comments from the board before we open it up to public comment?
Oh, I just wanted to say one more thing because I haven't said enough tonight, clearly. I did want to point out that prior to the pandemic, we were doing we had launched sort of a nascent effort in the department called the Neighborhood Planning Partnership, where we were going out to neighborhood organizations, particularly neighborhood organizations that don't normally participate in like comprehensive planning or, you know, the types of land development outside of a project. In my experience, like doing public participation when there's a development project occurring is like the worst time to do, you know, because you're trying to like educate public who don't deal with this in a stressful environment. And so it just, a lot of times it's, and these, you know, these types of hearings, for good or for bad, have a tendency to sort of bring out like a adversarial feeling. So what we've tried to do, or what we were doing, was just going out to neighborhoods, meeting with residents, and sort of explaining, you know, some of the what land use is, what zoning is, you know, how they can affect those things. Really kind of doing the just basic outreach and education, independent of any projects, so with the maybe naive hope that, you know, we'll just create more citizens who are more knowledgeable and about land development decisions. Because I think, you know, we've seen it at, you know, countless meetings where if you're, you know, just a regular person, you don't think about land use and zoning every day, or how development happens. Development looks like it falls from the sky, you know, and if there's not sort of a, you know, clear understanding, it's either like some arbitrary and capricious decision by, you know, a faceless bureaucrat, or you know, some sort of like under the table graft. And so one of the things of with the neighborhood planning partnership that we were trying to do is just to get out in the neighborhoods, build relationships, and talk about land development, how that occurs, how they can be effective in participating, you know, outside of, like I said, outside of any individual project. It is something that the city commission has talked about in terms of just public engagement, you know, holistically across the city. The communications department and I gave a presentation to the commission last year about this, and really it comes down to allocating hours. As I explained, the commission has to decide whether my staff reviewing development applications or issuing permits is just as important as my staff spending time to go out and just talk to people about land development as part of a you know, a function of the department. And that really comes down to like hours, staff, you know, time, resources. But I did want to say that is something, you know, independent of this neighborhood workshop that we are doing. We do intend to go back to doing that, you know, when we're able to meet in person, and hopefully, I think, grow that in a more sort of robust, more sort of official capacity as we go into 2021. So
That's fabulous, Andrew. I don't know where you came up with that idea.
Thank you. Any other comments from the guys before we go to the public? Okay, we'll open it up to public comment.
And we don't have any callers at this time.
Okay, I think maybe Mr. Diedenbach, you might be interested in commenting. Okay,
Indeed.
We'll go to Mr. Diedenbach.
I see. Can you all see me, or is Larry still up there?
Oh, we can see you.
Okay, cool. So yeah, we received this, and like Plan Board Member Hawkins said, I was a little bit concerned, and I think you mentioned it too, Madam Chair, about A3 being that we have a quasi-judicial process. And I wanted to offer maybe a constructive criticism of what I've seen in other communities in which we work. It's very frequent that the district commissioner in which a project is located will be brought into the fold. In the case like tonight's application, for example, the city commission wouldn't see the SUP for something that you all are final verdict on, but it's very helpful if commissioners know what's going on in their district. And a couple recent examples, we recently worked on Gainesville Regional Utilities groundwater recharge wetland park on Parker Road. So we took the opportunity, even though that was a special exception under Alachua County's Unified Land Development Code, and we notified each of the county commissioners with a fact sheet at the beginning of the process And it was put out there so that they could go to either our website or Gainesville Regional Utilities website to see what was going on, if any of their constituents called, and there would be unified information placed out there. It would not put them in any sort of violation or ex parte communications because the information was all uniformly supplied in a print form, and that way your commissioners know what's going on in their districts. And it really helps when you get to the public hearing process in there. On the public participation report, which would be the second page under C, under number 1, little a, 1, little a, parent, it talks about people that may be affected by the application. It's going to be difficult to say because I've heard probably out of the last 30 or 40 workshops that we've done in the 2020 calendar year, affected means different things to different people. So I think there needs to be some healthy discourse about that. And I heard new member to the plan board tonight talk about the idea of equity and social justice and environmental justice being a part of that, because decisions that happen in our community, especially in redevelopment and urban infill, have effects on a lot of people. So I think we need to think very solidly on that. I think it's a good idea, but I don't want to get in a position where it's subjective. And I like the fact that in the public participation report, the draft that's before us today in the strike through and underline version kind of sets forward how to write this report, right? It's parent 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And it tells you what you need to do. We routinely, obviously, keep our notice. You saw it in my PowerPoint tonight. We keep a copy of the ad, but I will side 100% with Plan Board Member Ackerman in the fact that we have probably spent somewhere between $40,000 and $50,000 this year with the Gainesville-SPAN publishing ads that are yay big, that very few people see. And when I conduct a neighborhood workshop and I inform people, you're here tonight either because you received a direct mailing, you heard about this through public notification, or you saw it in the Gainesville-SPAN, 99% of the time, it's the direct mailing that gets a person there. I've rarely had somebody say, absent maybe Melanie Barr, I saw this in the paper, so I came to see you, right? A lot of people don't scan the paper, and if they see it, it doesn't really tell them the big picture of what's going on. On the other side of that equation, too, the city mandates that we mail out to every neighborhood association with every neighborhood workshop that we put out. There's 85 of those right now currently in the mailing labels. That ends up being, you know, probably at least $100 there. If we could have a better focused direction on how to get the message out to those that are affected or feel that they are affected by the decision, that's far better, because, you know, mailing notifications to the Deer Run neighborhood when we're doing something downtown, I can honestly tell you that we probably have 2/3 to 3/4 of our neighborhood workshops, nobody shows up, or it's one person. And I see you nodding your head, Madam Chair. You know, you've been in those, well, when we were doing face-to-face meetings and the Holiday Inn, you know, meeting rooms, or any hotel or library, you know, media room that we could get, many times you set up and nobody shows up for them. So getting the message and getting an adequate, what I would say, leader or teaser to say, this is what's going to happen in a more graphically demonstrative format would be good, because it would get people an idea of what they're about to see or what the proposed change is. Because after all, usually it's the change that causes people to have concern about what's the decision before you all. So kind of lastly, in item C under virtual workshops, I think it was addressed by a couple folks. I think you did, Madam Chair, and others might have said that it's really difficult. And if there was a requirement to send out in the virtual meeting notification packet, the PowerPoint, we're not done. Literally our PowerPoints for the neighborhood workshop are probably finished the day of the neighborhood workshop. If there was a way, you know, and I could certainly, you know, work with all of our staff and we could be done a day early to ensure that those materials ended up either on a website for someone to download, or we put them in a Dropbox so that if you wanted to go there and get them, or if we, sent them to you so that you got them simultaneously to the day that the workshop was going to occur, so that if you couldn't tune in by video conference or Zoom or Teams, but you could call in by your phone, you would have the ability to have the paper in front of you, and the narrator could say, I'm now on page 4. This is the site plan. These materials were provided to those members who are only here in phone access. They could be seeing simultaneously exactly what you're depicting. And I think, when we were looking at these proposed changes, one of the things that we talked about is if you talked about what the envelope of the change was, meaning that if we're going from a 1-story building to a 2-story building, or a 2-story to a 5-story, show the envelope of what the difference is relative to the context area. Because we won't have architectural renderings. Not everyone is going to be doing their architectural stuff before they get an SUP approved, perhaps. Some do, but not everyone can do that. But you certainly could create a spatial box. You could do something in Google SketchUp relatively easy that would allow people to see what the relative comparison was in either height, scale, or massing, and what the code allows, and whether you were inside the code or you were asking for something special, such as a special use permit or going to like a PUD, PD. But I think the conversation has covered a lot of the points tonight that we had, and I know, Madam Chair, your office probably does dozens annually. We certainly do dozens and dozens of them annually, and there's a lot of money that's spent that I think is ineffectual, and we would much rather see a well-informed commission, a well-informed public, and people really coming to the meeting and being able to interact and start the relationship at the beginning. And so in closing, I'll say, again, using the example of what we did for Gainesville Regional Utilities on the groundwater recharge wetland park. From the first time we reached out to people, we started to build a cumulative list. Not only did we hold the required neighborhood workshop, we held additional workshops for anybody who couldn't attend. We went out and talked to the Sierra Club. We went out and talked to other groups. And if something is perhaps in a CRA district, it's a good idea to just go to the CRA too, so that you're engaging any of the overlay groups or any of the specific neighborhood groups, and just come to them on their terms, come to them at their meeting and help bring that forward. And after our approval, we still receive comments because we have development plans to do. We don't mind going back, and if somebody wants to have that special workshop, we will do that. And we always, if we can't get, a workshop to somebody, we'll take and put it on a jump drive, and we'll have our courier take it to their house so that they can watch it and call us and talk about it. But I think what you're doing is the right direction, because a lot of time and effort and capital is spent on trying to get the message out there, and it hasn't been as successful as it could be. And I think it starts with the commission knowing exactly what's happening in each of the commissioners' districts. Thanks.
Thank you. Ms. McMullen?
I believe we have a caller on the line to talk about this item.
Okay. We'll go to the caller.
Yeah, so we've got Brian Harrington that's joined us, and we'll get his line up right now. Brian?
Welcome, Brian.
Thank you. Good evening, Brian Harrington, immediate past president of the Builders Association of North Central Florida, and I'm also the director of construction and development at Trimark Properties. I will be brief. There's already been quite a bit of conversation on this, both by Mr. Diedenbach and several members of the plan board. I would just point out a couple things that maybe weren't discussed, and I apologize. There was some lag from the reporting that I saw from the time I started to when I called in, but it speaks in item C under public participation report, sub-bullet A, sub-bullet 1. There's a couple components. A lot of the language, I think the chair spoke to this, is very subjective. I know Mr. Diedenbach referenced that also, in terms of what is a substantive change, who determines how somebody may be affected by the application. And Again, there's a lot of subjective language, and it's who's ultimately going to make that judgment call that would be a concern that I would have. I would suggest that in terms of keeping people informed, once the neighborhood workshop has concluded and if the project is proceeding on its development track, that the city's existing sustainable development interactive map that allows you to track developments would be the perfect tool that you could use to be the repository for all that information. And then, you know, just in general, and I think the question was asked, I don't know if I heard an answer and I couldn't see people's body language, but part of this reads like you're submitting a plan that you're going to then execute, and then the balance of it is reporting back on how that plan was executed. I see that as a potential, you know, bog down in an already protracted process. So hopefully it could just be that you have a defined plan requirement that the city outlines, and then your report back is the history of those events that transpired, and you're complying with that reporting plan requirement. And then on the meetings, if there are intended to be, and I think Chair Sutton spoke to this, if it's a dual meeting, is there a in-person and then a virtual option? Is it one or the other? Because that can create certainly some challenges in capturing the in-person meeting content. How are you miking people up? We don't have the same facilities that the city has in the main auditorium, so that certainly would give me pause. And then what's the logistics of getting all this now an incredible amount of data that has to be compressed, stored in the city's site? How does it get formatted? Who's, you know, responsible for that? There are a lot of just logistical components, but in general, the subjective language concerns me greatly, and then making it a little bit more of a streamlined process. So I'll conclude. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Harrington. Are there any other callers on the line? Do we know?
No, ma'am.
No? Okay, great, thank you. Is there anyone else? I don't know, Mr. Diedmach, if any of your colleagues are still on, or did you sort of represent your comments?
I think he bailed.
He dropped off. Okay.
No, I'm here. I just turned off my audio so I wouldn't interrupt Brian. No, I know Craig was here, and I don't know if he had anything additional. We had emailed, and we had some of the same stuff earlier. I did want to say one thing. Plan Board Member Ackerman's comment about seeing the signs floppy on the side of the road. The city of Alachua uses like a campaign, you know, weatherproof plastic AeroCore sort of board. And when we advertise for our projects in Alachua, we go and get those AeroCore boards and we put on them an actual sheet, if you will, of what the project is. And so there's an 8.5 by 11 that's added to the actual city property, and they're out there. But to his point, you can't imagine how many times those get mowed over by agencies that are, you know, working the state roads or the county roads, and we drive by them frequently and we take pictures of them. But that's why they switched to that AeroCore, hoping that people would say, okay, this says, you know, city meeting being held. But yeah, more of them get mowed over than you can imagine, or pulled down or taken away by people and used for other purposes. But that's it.
Thank you. Any other comments by board members? It sounds like we've given you some things to chew on and bring back to us. I don't think we're going to have a motion to. Do you need a motion to continue this item?
Great. Yeah, great conversation.
Okay.
Everybody brought up great points, and we'll bring back some revisions in
Okay. Thank you all. That's the last full item on our agenda. Is there any member comments?
I just want to add, it's great to have Member Hurst and Member Corrugator here. Congratulations on your appointment, and thank you for volunteering to serve.
Thank you. Yes, welcome to our monthly meeting, potentially more often this year with the comp plan. 26, Mr. Ackerman.
And actually, Thomas beat me to it. Welcome to our new members. I also wanted to acknowledge that we have two departing members. Erin Condon, who served on the board for 9 years, and at least 3 or 4 of those years she served as our very able chair, including during the last major code update we did. And Megan Walker Radke, who served for 3 years and also brought a lot of different perspectives, and we're going to miss their experience very much. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Typically, I know we present something to former members with all of everything going on. I don't know if we're mailing something.
We have plaques ordered. I think what we may do is perhaps for the next meeting, we can have them join via Zoom, and then we could show them the plaque, and then they can, or we could mail it to them.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Any other member comments? Okay. With that, so we are going to have another meeting this month on January 28th. I believe that's going to be another hybrid meeting. So be sure that if you have a conflict, let staff know so we can be sure that there is a quorum here. And we will go ahead and adjourn for tonight and see you all in a few weeks.
Oh, Madam Chair, right
do
before we
something
adjourn, I did want to say, next week on the 14th, it's a general policy meeting by the for the City Commission, and the city's comp plan consultants will be presenting sort of where they are with the proposal. So if you have a opportunity to tune in, it should be a good presentation. And yeah, and that's it. And I do appreciate everybody showing up in person, because some of our meetings that we've had where it's been some members on Zoom and some members in the auditorium, just is it's problematic. So I appreciate everybody coming in.
Yes, thank you all for coming, and welcome to our new members, and we will see you later this month. Thank you. Adjourn tonight.